If you want to know why you dey feel the way they feel inside your mind, inside your brain, and generally why things dey the way they around you, Mind Clinic na the radio program we go teach you how to deal with all different types of stress and other things wey person dey go through. On top Mind Clinic, you fit talk about mind matter wey concern you directly or the one wey no even concern you directly.
All right, it's a very beautiful Wednesday morning in the FCT, the 20th day in the month of May 2020. Well, we're here to talk about issues regarding mental health. My name is Victor Pepple. This is the Mind Clinic. It's proudly brought to you by Neem Foundation. I'm not alone on the program. We have the very beautiful Chinyere Ugo Udensi. She's also on the show. Good morning.
Morning, Victor. Morning, listeners.
Yes. How are you? We're hoping that you're doing very well.
Yes, I am. I'm doing very well.
It's okay. Very well. Okay, so we get straight to it. All right. On the show today, we're going to be looking at toxic masculinity. Now, we hear a lot of this on Twitter when a lot of ladies come out to drag the men and say a lot of things about how, men are toxic in the relationship or very abusive and all of that. But for some persons, it's a very huge grammar, toxic masculinity. But it's fine because we have a capable guest on the show who would help us dissect all your questions. He'll bring clarity to all your concerns, especially on the show today. Our guest on the show is a business management and marketing graduate from Keele University. He identified a growing trend in the negligence of the well-being of men in society. So he decided to do something about it. And this led to the birth of Man Up Initiative. I'm sure you've heard about the Man Up Initiative. Of course, we'll be speaking to the founder on the show today. Now, the Man Up Initiative is a platform that uses various means to reach young men with the aim of challenging and changing value systems and perspectives. That's not all. Our guest is also a co-founder of the Vision Group, a youth empowerment initiative that aims to give young people a sense of direction in their career and entrepreneurial aspirations. He is a strong advocate on topics such as mental health amongst men, gender-based violence, and masculinity. Temi Dayo-Seriki is our guest on the show. Good morning, Temi.
Good morning. Good morning.
We're so glad you're able to join us on the show. I'm very well. We're still coping, the whole COVID-19 situation.
Okay, tell me about it. It's such an easy conversation starter nowadays. How are you coping? I'm glad to be on. Thank you for asking me.
All right then. So we'll get straight to the conversation. One big question on the minds of our listeners now would be, what is masculinity?
Okay, so the topic of masculinity is very subjective. So if you check online, you're going to see many different definitions by many different people. And what that just means, what that just shows you is that my definition of masculinity can be different from yours. Right?
Yes.
So how I understand masculinity is, looking inward. Masculinity to me is however I identify myself as a man and living in that, and living in it without any regret.
Now, does this play a role in today's society?
Yes, so for example, if I use myself as an example, a big part of my definition of masculinity is leadership. In society, I feel like men are called to lead. Obviously not saying women can be leaders, but I feel like they're calling on men to lead, and that doesn't just mean, president, governor, that doesn't just mean that. It just means at every level, every place in life you find yourself, try your best to be forward thinking, try your best to help. And again, let me just point out that my definition of leadership is service. Right? So being able to be humble, so that takes away pride and ego, putting yourself out there, bringing yourself to the level of others so that you can help, that to me is leadership. So, and that to me is a massive part of manhood and how it affects society.
All right.
That is
But when does masculinity becomes toxic?
Okay, so the topic of toxic masculinity is essentially when your idea of masculinity starts to harm other people and yourself. So, for example, my idea of masculinity might be I need to be strong. I need to be mentally stable. I can't cry. I must be physically fit, right?
Yes.
I don't think it's toxic to think like that. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's toxic to think like that. I think it becomes toxic when if I'm living in that idea of masculinity and it's bringing others down. So, for example, if I'm bringing another man down because I see him crying, calling him weak, that's toxic. If it can be so, it can be harming other men, harming women, and harming yourself. So obviously you can harm women. The idea of women can't work. Living in that massive patriarchal, having a massive patriarchal mindset is toxic. Especially towards women. Gender-based violence, extremely toxic, especially towards women. I mean, men go through that as well. From other men, this is also toxic. Are you understand it? And then obviously yourself, when you harm yourself, I feel like that might even be the worst of all, because when you exempt yourself from a part of humanity, such as vulnerability, a lot of, I guess maybe we can get into that later, but the idea of a man holding himself back from being vulnerable just because that's not his idea of masculinity is extremely harmful to himself and to his mental health.
All right.
And that in itself is toxic just because it harms you.
And how much of an impact does this have on the man as well as the society?
It's pretty close. Toxic masculinity seems to be becoming a trend. I don't know how to. I mean, you see, like you said earlier, you hear a lot of people say, a lot of people, talk about it on social media. I mean, yes, a lot of people don't really understand it, but it seems to be becoming normalized, which is what man is trying to fight against. I feel like in society it's like a double-edged effect, I guess. I don't want to say so, because it's also making people aware of it. It's also making people talk about it. We're having conversations like this now. I always tell people that we're in a much better position in society than maybe the last century, because our parents were never having these types of conversations.
Yes.
It shows that society is changing, and it shows that we're kind of heading in the right direction just by having these types of conversations. But obviously, we don't want a situation where toxic masculinity becomes a norm in society. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so for instance, now a lady would come out and say she had an argument with her boyfriend or her partner, and it was so heated that they had to, split maybe for some days. And eventually the guy just finds a way of making up, right, without saying sorry outrightly. And so some people have described this to be very toxic. Sometimes when you are in an abusive relationship, the guy does not outrightly use the word sorry, right? And people feel like it's a magic word. It could, make things work again. But he refuses to do that because he feels like, I'm a man. I shouldn't say sorry. I shouldn't say thank you. I shouldn't apologize for, any time I'm wrong, and all of those things, that happen sometimes in a relationship. And we see some of these things happen a lot on the streets of Twitter, where people are being dragged for their bitter relationships and all that. But I would like to find out from you. You seem to be an expert in this, right? So we would like to find out. What are some examples of toxic masculinity?
Okay, so
I know you started out mentioning a few of them, but let's get a bit practical, so the listener can understand.
Yeah. Okay, so the example you just gave is a brilliant one. One thing I should also say that is I've noticed that it's a bit, a lot of people are in toxic relationships, yes. and a lot of it has to do with the men's role to play in that relationship. But I just feel like, generally, everyone has a part to play. Obviously, not saying that we should condone toxicity or accepting it or anything like that. But I just wanted to point that out. But when it comes to examples, I think that the example you gave about entitlement is super key. If a man is feeling like he doesn't have to ask you for something, or doesn't have to say please when you want something, in a sense that's toxic, because it's like, I'm entitled. It makes, like, as a man, I feel like I'm entitled to your time. I'm entitled to even cooking. The other day, I remember one time, and a lot of it is down to ignorance. A lot of it is just because we don't know and we're not taught. Because a lot of what our parents saw was highly patriarchal, right? And that's essentially what they pass on to us as men. And so we kind of been left on our own to figure it out for ourselves, what it really means to be a man, how to be a good man, you understand? So it's a big issue, but again, conversations like this are helping. Another example could be boys don't cry. Boys will be boys. That's one I don't like. Or my worst one is Man Up.
Exactly, but you're the founder of Man Up Initiative.
Yeah, I'm sure you can imagine how it must be to hear somebody tell you that, my dad told me I should man up. What does that mean?
You're the founder of the term.
Honestly, so the man up now, like what we are trying to do is trying to redefine what that means. Okay. If I tell you to man up, to me you tell me that. If I tell you to man up, 9 times out of 10, I'm telling you that you should cry.
Oh, really?
Because
that's like the reverse now.
Exactly, just on its head. Because a lot of what toxic masculinity does is it exempts us men from a massive part of humanity. What it really means to be human. We've kind of separated ourselves from that and then called it manhood. And then said, okay, this is what it means to be a man, but it's not. And we're learning that now. And again, saying things like boys will be boys, that just promotes violence. Like boys are fighting with their kids, and you hear his parents say boys will be boys, or things like that. And I feel like a lot of it is just down to parenting, down to conditioning, down to what you were exposed to growing up. It's essentially what shapes your views now, and that's the case for everyone.
All right, I'll branch this conversation to a post that was made earlier in the year by the veteran actor Peter Doce, where he talked about men who kneel down to propose, right? And he said it's not okay for a man to kneel down to propose in this part of the world, that it's a Western thing, it's a Western culture. But we adapt, we just pick up everything we see online and we begin to live that life, that he perhaps never knelt down to propose to his wife. He's lived with his wife for over 30 years, and no one has ever come to him to tell him to stop beating his wife. So there were a lot of things that were said, and some people deduced a lot of things from his comment and attributed it to being toxic, really toxic, and some described it as toxic masculinity, not kneeling down to propose to your wife and taking full control perhaps of the woman in the home. You say, oh, this is my wife, I married her, I'm in charge, and then anything she needs to do, she needs perhaps permission from you to do that. I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Wow, okay, so I guess I should first start by addressing the topic of culture. A lot of times culture can affect how people behave, but again, goes back to my earlier definition of being toxic. When it then gets to a point of harming another person, then it becomes toxic, regardless of what it is. So for example, something like you not wanting to kneel down to propose, whatever your reasons for that are, it's up to you, do you understand? But if it's a thing where you and your significant other are fine with that, then I don't really know if that, I can't really say if I can define that as toxic, if it is a mutual agreement. But that's just on that point. But on the side of, hitting my dude, I feel like it's clear, the exposure he's had to high extreme patriarchy. I don't want to just call it patriarchy, but extreme patriarchy. He has been exposed to this idea of the woman is beneath you, the woman is meant to work for you, the woman is she's only there to make your life easier. You understand? He's not he's not being, according to what manhood defines manhood as, he's not being a leader, he's not serving, he's not humbling himself, to be able to help his wife in ways, like for him to say that nobody has come to. I remember reading that actually, and my shock. Hearing it again this morning, I just couldn't hold back.
Yeah.
It's a big problem, and I feel like, people like that who have a big platform really have big responsibility, because there are men who are seeing that, and there are men who are validating what they are doing based on what he's doing. They're saying, okay, Joshua is doing this, or sorry, I didn't catch it. He's doing this, so I can do it as well. You know what I mean? He's doing this, so it's fine. He's doing this, so it's right. So that means, it's accepted for me. It's fine for me to do it. But it's really sad for me, honestly.
All right. We'd like to find out from you, Chinyerugo. I mean, you've been listening since. We'd like to find out your take in all of this.
Yeah, I think, it's quite an interesting topic that we're talking about today. And for me, one of the biggest things that stand out is that a lot of the times when we talk about toxic masculinity, we focus on the effects it has on other people. There's always somebody else in the picture, and that we forget the part of harming ourselves. And I'm glad anybody spoke about it, the fact that even as a man, your identity of yourself, the way you identify yourself or the way you identify masculinity can actually begin to harm you. And that's something that we don't even take into consideration, or we don't even talk about, because we always think about it in the context of another person. So for me, if there's one takeaway, it would be that the way you actually define yourself, your identity, the way you look at yourself, the culture around your identity and who you are as a man can actually have a negative impact on you. And every time, I like the fact that you talked about, trying to change the narrative of manning up, man up. It doesn't have to be that you don't have to be in touch with your humanity. You don't have to be in touch with your vulnerable side. There's more to it, because if you take away that part of you, you can suffer as a person. If you're not able to express yourself in a way that's productive, that adds value, it might eventually be destructive, and we know that being destructive does to the person.
Exactly.
Causes more harm than good. Yeah.
Exactly. The high suicide rate in men really, I believe, stems from this topic. And just the fact that men just don't, express themselves. If you see a child crying, once you tell your child, boys don't cry, or man up, that's the end. He's going to then from that moment believe that crying is not a man's thing, that it's a woman's thing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to talk about in regards to these very conversation we're having. Now, like it or not, consciously or subconsciously, the children, when they see their father behave in a certain manner, they begin to pick it and feel that is how a man should be. Now, I'm tying this to the clamor for gender equality, and we put it vis-a-vis gender roles. You've seen the house where they say, in some homes till date, the man is not allowed to do house chores, right? He cannot cook, he should not sweep and clean, and all that is meant for the ladies, and he grows up that way. He meets a partner that does not come from that school of thought. That's not how it is in her home, right? And it becomes a grave problem for both of them. It becomes a huge problem. They can't find a balance. This is not what he's used to, perhaps 25 years of his life, all right? And then he's not apologetic about it. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it, all right? I'm a man. You get what I mean? And so sometimes it leads to a lot of misunderstanding in the home. What advice would you give to such a man who's listening right now, Chinyerugo?
Firstly, I think our guest may have.
Okay.
I just want to get him back on.
Okay.
And then.
All right. Let's do that, and then we'll continue the conversation again. We'll be taking your calls right now. If you have contributions, you have questions in regards to the topic of discussion right now, please do well to call us up. Well, I was asking, right, about a young man who would grow up and perhaps we look up to our fathers. So you'd see your father maybe hitting your mother and you think it's cool or you think it's right to do that. Or for instance, you grew up in a home where men are not allowed to do the home chores and you feel it's very okay. And then you meet a partner who thinks differently. Of course, we're in the era where we advocate for gender equality, right?
Yeah.
And then yes, some men will tell you that there are gender roles where men shouldn't cook, and this might be a big problem and might, pose a huge danger in a very fantastic relationship where you come from a particular school of thought and you have ideologies that cannot be swayed. You get what I mean? So it's very difficult to change that mindset for the guy, but for the lady, of course, she grew up in the house where her brothers were also involved in doing house chores and all that. And so you try to talk to the guy, have a conversation with him, and he tells you, let's not even have this conversation. It's not going to work forever. It's not going to work. I'm a man. All right, and you hear those things. I am a man. And sometimes the lady feels like, no, you're not being supportive here. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
If, for instance, you have such a man, okay, we'll try to get in touch with our guest again. By the way, we're discussing toxic masculinity. Our guest on the show is Temidayo Seriki, the founder Man Up Initiative, and he's a business management and marketing graduate from Keele University. He identified a growing trend in the negligence of well-being of men in society and decided to do something about it. And this led to the birth of Man Up Initiative. Of course, it is a platform that uses various means to reach young men with the aim of challenging and changing value system and perspectives. On the show this morning, we're asking, how can a man channel his masculinity for better? We hear about toxic masculinity all the time. A lot of ladies are always very, very furious when some of these issues are raised. Perhaps you'd see a man who would tell you that men will always be men. And so for that, African tradition allows that a man can have as many girlfriends or partners as possible. And women tells you no, that's not supposed to be. All right. There are a lot of angles to these very conversation, but we're hoping that we can wrap this up in the shortest time possible. But if you have questions, please do well to reach us. We would like feedbacks from you because the show is designed for you, our listener. All right, we're getting to the calls now. Good morning. Hello. Good morning to you. What's your name?
My name is Chuks.
Please speak up a bit.
Chuks
Ike, go ahead.
Yeah, there's something that we need to know, that we are African.
Chuks, turn down the volume on your radio. Move away from where the radio is.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Chuks.
Yeah, what I want to tell you is that we're Africans and we run in our blood and we can't go out from our blood.
Okay.
So whatever happens to an African, a woman married to an African woman are made to support the husband. And not him and the husband to have job. It's not being made that 50-50 something of the West. Even in the West, it don't happen like that. It don't happen as we copy from the West. Not everything we see we copy from the West. It's not done. If you go to the West, we have lived for years. You see a man who is married, who have maybe 2 or 3 children outside the home. They have to tell the wife, look, I have this one, my child, this is my child. So let us be what we can do. An African culture, support your wife, then the main work of a woman should do it. And for that of willing man to propose to an African woman, I cannot do that. That's my own thing.
All right. Thank you, Chuks. We'll come to address that later. Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you. Please turn down the volume on your radio set and speak up a bit so we can hear you. All right. Just speak up a bit so that we can hear you clearly.
Yes. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Tell us your name and location, please.
Yes. Mohammed Hassan from Gwagwalada.
All right, Ahmed.
Mohammed Hassan.
Mohammed Hassan in Gwagwalada. Go ahead, please.
Yes. You see, so we know a man is only said to be a man. But when you have a good relationship,
when you have good relationship with your wife, and you cannot, once you cannot assist, you cannot cook, that is, you have not used to that. So the best thing is you tell her the truth. If possible, look for housekeeper for her to assist her. It's good for a man to assist his wife and so. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Muhammad, for your call. Well, if you're listening, Dayo, a lot of men would tell you that based on African culture, right, a man will always be a man, no matter how we try to talk about gender roles.
Yeah, I caught that, especially from the first caller. I didn't catch his name either. My views on that is, I mentioned culture earlier, and again, it's the same thing. The moment culture affects another human being's life in a negative way, it becomes oppression, and oppression cannot be condoned, whatever it is. So if you feel like, okay, you were brought up, with the idea, like I believe you said African women are made to help the husband. Is that what you said? I couldn't really hear it.
And we copy a lot of Western culture, but just let's pause the conversation there a bit. I'll take a few calls and then come back to wrap up. Hello. All right, I'm sorry. Please go on. The numbers to reach us on is 0817-8000-947. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. What's your name?
Yeah, my name is Shegun. I'm calling from Kubwa.
Shegun in Kubwa. Go ahead. What's your contribution?
Yeah, my contribution is that marriage should be seen, marital relationship should be seen as something between two friends. And my own belief is that whatever support a man can give to his wife will not be out of place. Secondly, a marriage is not always winner takes it all. You win some, you lose some. It's a matter of understanding and ability to tolerate the other person. So that's my own contribution.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. More calls coming right through, but we need to wrap up the conversation in a bit. Anyways, you can keep your messages coming through on WhatsApp 0817-8000-947. That's where to send a WhatsApp message to, and we'll try as much as possible to, take all of your messages next week, maybe. All right, it's back to you, Dayo.
Yeah, I was just touching on the point of oppression, and I feel like regardless of however you were brought up, you should be able to identify when something you're doing is harming another person, even if they're quiet about it.
Yes.
And the moment you identify that it needs to change, and that just means the culture needs to change. That's it. Like it doesn't mean that we are becoming like white people. It just means that we just need to redefine what it means to be an African man and an African woman. That's all it means. Like staying in touch with what God really intended for us when He created us, but then making sure that it's a society that everybody is happy. Because, you can say, they can say whatever they want to say about African man and, women are meant to do this and women are meant to do that. But there are lots of unhappy women in marriage.
Exactly.
They will just not say anything because they as well were brought up to believe that this is how women are meant to be treated, but they are being oppressed. And that's just the truth. Like, it seems like it's right because it's culture. And, people always use culture to validate wrong behavior, but it's wrong. Even if you look at corruption, very soon, like, a lot of the Westerners see corruption as part of the culture in Nigeria. Does that make it right?
It doesn't.
No. Exactly. So
but some would tell you too that it's part of culture for your wife to kneel down when serving her husband food. We still see that happen. Perhaps not in this. I don't know if it still happens in this generation, but we see that in the previous till dates. We'll still see some women from our mother's generation kneel down, and it's not a problem to them. All right. But let's quickly pause now to take a message from the WhatsApp portal because we have a number of them. Roman in Zone 6 says, "Good day, guys. It's toxic, adding toxic to masculinity. It says, masculinity are attributes of charm in men, which everyone admires, including women. There you go. Now, when a man has an overbearing attitude that hurts himself and others, he should be given some other name. We all have our toxics in us. It is a matter of constraining it. Roman from Wuse Zone 6.
I like what you said at the end about we all have our toxics, and I agree with that. Just on from a general perspective,
yes.
Everyone has what they're working on, both men and women, and if Roman feels like the word toxic is toxic in itself, I feel like, it's fair to him, if that's what he thinks. And that's fair, but that's the term that society has given it. So it's really difficult to fight that, So,
but you also know that it goes back to culture, just like you've been saying, and so sometimes it takes very huge persuasion to let go, right?
Yeah.
For instance, you grew up in a house where you see your father do these things, all your uncles do these same things, and then you listen to someone, perhaps online or on the radio, you read up somewhere, and that just tells you that, it's wrong, you shouldn't be doing that. It might take a lot of persuasion to let go,
Yeah.
But in wrapping up, final thoughts, because of our time.
Yeah.
Okay, final thoughts. I guess my final thoughts will just be directed to the younger generation, the younger people listening. It's important for us to be the deciders, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who are going to be the drivers of society in the future. So we have to decide now how we want it to look. And that all stems from, habits we pick up, cultures we pick up growing up, which is now. So my quick point would just be to young men about that. Try to look, our parents. That's something I always try to do. Pick the good, but then also filter the bad, and then sit down and define for yourself who you are as a man and what makes you a man, and live in it unapologetically.
Great. Chinyerugo.
So, I think the discussion we've had is very, very clear that masculinity has a place in society. It's part of the identity of a man and who a man should be. However, when it gets to, a lot of the conversation that was had is around marriage, around the husband and the wife. But then we can also look at toxic masculinity in relationships with friends and family.
And at the workplace as well.
Exactly. So it cuts across different types of relationship and platforms. The biggest thing every man listening out should remember is that the moment that the way you identify yourself begins to cause harm to the people around you, and most especially to yourself, and when it's pointed out to you, I think you should look into it, because sometimes we do things that, we talk about culture and upbringing, and we may not even pay attention, or we may not be aware of it. But the moment that it's pointed out to you, perhaps you should just step back and look at it and say, what am I really doing? And how productive is this relationship that I'm having with the people around me?
All right. So much said on the show already, and I hope that we can have a part 2 of this conversation, because we're not able to touch on all of the issues and then take a lot of calls from our listeners. And I also feel like the worst part of it is when you're trying to point it out to a man and he feels like, well, you're younger, so why should you be telling me what to do and what not to do? What experience do you have? And sometimes they get very angry when you try to tell them, or a man in general, that what you're doing is not right. He gets angry. Even if you're a fellow man trying to point it out to him, all right? As part of being a man, how do you talk to me in that manner?
That's a problem, because a lot of the times men are being attacked. We're not having a conversation. Everybody's attacking the man about what he has done wrong. And we're not trying to teach or train or educate or communicate. So when you already come with toxic masculinity, there's like a defense, because you're going to attack me and attack my identity. So when you take somebody's identity, what else do you have left? What else do they have, with them?
So the takeaway is, when we're having the conversation, we should do it in a bit subtle manner, in a very subtle manner, maybe.
we should communicate and not, even in our communication, we shouldn't be toxic.
Okay.
So we should communicate effectively.
All right then.
Yeah,
well,
I agree with you.
Drop the mic there. Nothing to say again. Very good place to leave the conversation. I've been speaking with Chinyeru Goldensi, clinical psychologist at Neem Foundation, and we've also had Temi Dayo Seriki, founder Man Up Initiative, on the show. It was good to have you on the show today. You brought clarity to a number of issues, and we thank you very, very so much.